Hello, and welcome to WhimseyHaven, where little breaths find big dreams. Let's drift into today's sleep story together.
Welcome, friends. Today's story is The Wishing Well. While you listen, you can close your eyes, rest your body, and let your imagination do the traveling. Let's begin. Chapter 1. A Map in the Attic. The map didn't look important at first. It was folded like a paper sandwich, brittle at the edges, and tucked inside an old board game box in Ivy's grandmother's attic. Dust motes drifted in the summer light like glittering fish, and Ivy had to sneeze 3 times before she could even read the faded words. The Trails of Wonderwood, Foxglove Path, Ribbon Ridge, Echo Hollow, ends at the Wishing Well. Wishing Well? Ivy whispered, brown eyes brightening. Is it real? Scott, her little brother, pushed his glasses up his nose. Only one way to know, he said, already imagining sandwiches. He always imagined sandwiches before adventures. We'll need snacks. Raina, their neighbor from 2 houses down, grinned. She had quick hands, a quicker smile, and a talent for tying perfect knots in shoelaces, ribbons, and problems. And a rope, she said, because rope belonged in stories like boats belonged in water. They packed fast. Peanut butter crackers, 3 apples, 1 pear, Raina insisted. A coil of rope, water bottles, a pocket compass that mostly pointed to wherever Scott wanted to go, and the map. Ivy clipped a pencil to her shirt. For notes, she said, feeling very explorer-ish. Then they raced down the creaky stairs and out the back gate, where the lawn faded into tall grass, and the tall grass blurred into the beginning of Wonderwood. The air changed as soon as they stepped under the first arch of birch trees. It grew cooler and braver, carrying the spicy smell of pine and something faintly sweet, like sugar and rain. Listen, Ivy said. They did, and heard, a hush that wasn't silence. Leaves conferring, insects fiddling. Somewhere far off, water speaking its watery language. Scott unfolded the map. Foxglove Path first, he said. Then Ribbon Ridge, then Echo Hollow, then... He tapped the curling letters with a drum roll of 2 fingers. The Wishing Well. Do wishes really come true there? Raina asked, not teasing, just honest. Ivy considered. Maybe, she said, but we still have to walk the trails. Even wishes like effort. Then let's start with effort, Scott declared. And crackers. He handed everyone a square, and the 3 of them, map reader, knot maker, note taker, stepped onto Foxglove Path. Chapter 2. Foxglove Path and the Patient Hare. Foxglove Path ribboned beneath their sneakers in a soft purple-pink lane. Tall foxglove bells drowsed along both sides, and bees worked at them with the humming focus of librarians. The path narrowed around a fallen trunk, too big to step over and too prickly to crawl beneath. Scott eyed it with the practical worry of a sandwich engineer. We could go back. Or we could ask, Raina said, pointing. A hare sat on the trunk like a tiny king on a wooden throne, ears long as sail masts, fur the color of toasted marshmallow, nose whisking, whisk, whisk. He watched them with dark marble eyes that seemed to reflect not only Ivy, Scott, and Raina, but also the whole path, stretching back behind them and forward into the trees. Excuse me, Ivy said, because politeness was a compass too. We're trying to reach the Wishing Well. The log is in the way. Said the hare. His mouth hardly moved, but his voice was a ribbon of patient sound. Logs do that. Questions too. Questions? Scott blinked. Like, can I? Should I? What if? The hare thumped one hind foot. Tap, tap. You can spend a season sitting on those little travelers. Raina uncoiled her rope. Or we can move the log. The hare's whiskers twitched, which might have been a smile. A good plan is a wish with muscles. Try wrapping the rope around those roots. Keep your feet low. Pull together, not apart. They did, grunting and laughing and sliding a little in the pine needles. Ivy's pencil fell out of her shirt. Scott tucked it behind his ear. Raina adjusted the knot like an orchestra conductor adjusting a tempo. The log shifted with a groan, rolled once, and settled to the side. "Teamwork is the shortcut most travelers miss," the hare said, hopping down. "When you find the wishing well, remember that. And," he lifted one ear like a flag, "listen for what water refuses." "What it refuses?" Ivy asked. "Water won't climb," the hare said. "It won't leap into the sky, no matter how many times the sky invites. It follows the true slope." He bowed, or maybe he just sniffed at a clover, sprang into the ferns, and vanished, leaving only a thread of sound behind. The idea of patience. They crossed the cleared path feeling bigger somehow and very awake. Chapter 3. Ribbon Ridge and the Lark Who Forgot Her Song. Foxglove Path gave way to a wide green shoulder called Ribbon Ridge. It wasn't a ridge the way Scott imagined ridges, sharp and rocky and shouting, "Ta-da." It was a long, sloping meadow that climbed gently toward a bright horizon, braided with wildflower ribbons, cornflower blue, marigold orange, clover red. The wind ran ahead of them like a kite string. Raina raced it. Ivy held the map above her head and pretended it was also a kite. Scott pretended his sandwich was a kite but ended up eating it, which is a common fate for the fragile dreams of sandwiches. Halfway up the slope, they heard a sound like a question trying to become an answer. A lark, small and speckled, hopped along a fence post, beak open, no music coming out. "Oh," Ivy whispered, because it felt like a secret that needed gentleness. "Are you okay?" "I forget the middle," said the lark in a voice made of commas and pauses. "Beginning, easy. Ending, easy. But when I try the middle, it falls apart like wet paper." Raina softly whistled a goofy little tune. The lark shook her head. "That's not mine." Scott did math in the air with his finger, which sometimes helped him remember things. 2 + 2 +. "Maybe," he said, "you're trying to sing it all at once." "Middle is just a bunch of tiny nows," Ivy added. "Maybe sing one now at a time." The lark lifted her head. "Break the meadow into notes," she said, as if reading from a cookbook. "Measure the wind, stir in breath." She closed her eyes. Their eyes followed. A second, another, a string of seconds tied together with attention, and then the music came. Not all at once, a single bright note like a bead, then another, then a run of silver drops. Soon the air above Ribbon Ridge filled with sound so clear it felt like seeing. The lark sang the meadow blue, sang the flowers awake, sang Ivy's shoulders looser, and Scott's thoughts calmer, and Raina's feet into a skip step she didn't know she knew. When the song finished, the lark bowed to the midair, wings for curtains, sky for stage, and arrowed up. "The middle is many beginnings," she called. "Walk yours. That's where trails become stories." They walked, noticing more, how grass makes stripes in the wind, how ants move in little punctuation marks, how the sun leans a little closer when you lean too. At the far edge of Ribbon Ridge, the meadow folded into a grove of beeches whose pale trunks shone like moons. A wooden sign leaned sleepily against one, Echo Hollow. An arrow curved downward. "Down we go," Scott said, checking the compass. It pointed helpfully to down. Chapter 4. Echo Hollow, the Fox with 3 Names, and the Bridge of Listening. Echo Hollow wasn't spooky. It was quieter, which is not the same thing. The beech trees held the light like cupped hands, and the ground was cool and steadier than their steps. A creek stitched the hollow from one end to the other, and ferns sold the idea of emerald to anything that would buy it. They followed the creek until it fattened into a pool. Stones crouched around it like old friends listening to a joke they'd heard 100 times but would happily hear again. A bridge crossed the narrowest part, a plank bridge with lichen freckles and a green smile of moss. At the near end of the bridge sat a fox. He had a tail like a flame and eyes like matching questions. Around his neck was a collar made of leaves, and at his feet lay 3 smooth river stones, each carved with a symbol: a spiral, a feather, a small wave. "Hello," Ivy said, because hello is a door. "We're going to the wishing well." "Everyone is sooner or later," said the fox. His voice sounded like it had been polished on the inside of a hollow log. "I am called many things." He tapped the spiral stone. "This is the name that means wonder." He tapped the feather. "This is the name that means wonder." He tapped the wave. "And this is the name that means listen." "Are you a riddle?" Scott asked, intrigued. "Of course," said the fox very mildly, "but I am also a bridge keeper." Raina looked at the bridge, considered its mossy grin, and asked the question bridges always want you to ask. "What do we have to do to cross?" "Choose the name you will carry across," the fox said, "and then cross in the way it asks to be crossed." Ivy looked at her friends. Scott made a face like the one he made when he solved a particularly curly fraction. Raina tilted her head the way she did when she listened to thunder and tried to guess how far away it was. "I'll take wonder," Ivy said at last, touching the feather. "It feels like a key." "I'll take wonder," Scott decided, picking up the spiral, "because I'm already doing it." Raina nodded. "Then I'll take listen," she said, and touched the wave. "Good," said the fox. "Cross with your choices." Ivy stepped onto the bridge first. Wonder asked her to notice. So she did, the burble of the creek in 3 different pitches, how the moss rang a little when she pressed it with a palm, how a dragonfly sketched a letter on the air and then wrote the whole word, here. Scott wandered, which didn't mean lost. It meant letting his feet find small surprises, pausing to peer at a water strider skating like a sentence across the pool, stopping to drop a stick and count how long it took to drift beneath the plank. 1 fried pickle, 2 fried pickle. Raina listened, not just with ears, with the soles of her feet and the tiny muscles in her shoulders and the space behind her eyes. The bridge had a sound, so did the trees, so did the quiet. On the far side, the fox gave a small, satisfied nod. "Many travelers run across," he said. "They reach the other side, but they miss the crossing He flicked his tail once, setting a spark in the air. "You each brought a different side with you. The well will like that." "Do you know it?" Ivy asked, heart tapping faster. "The wishing well." "The well knows me," said the fox. He smiled a fox's geometrical smile. "It knows everyone who has learned to ask for what is true." He padded away without a goodbye, which seemed exactly right. Some creatures left spaces you could fill with your own hello. Chapter 5. The Wishing Well, which was not where they expected. Beyond Echo Hollow, the creek hurried downhill, and the trees widened their spacing like dance partners making room for the spectacular part. A last bend opened onto a small clearing, and there it was, a circular wall of stones glowing with shallow age, a wooden bucket on a rope, and a roof dark with weather and swallow nests. "The wishing well," Scott breathed. "Finally," said Raina, whose feet liked both skipping and stopping in that order. They approached with the kind of quiet that can hear a moth blink. On the stone rim, someone had carved words in gentle letters. "Wish true, pay attention, leave light." "What does that last one mean?" Scott asked. "Like, don't take the bucket?" "Maybe it means leave a little brightness behind you," Ivy said softly. Raina cupped a hand around the rim and peered in. "It's deep," she whispered. Her voice came back thinner, curious, deep, eep. They each took a turn leaning over. The water below was so clear it looked like a piece of the sky fell in and decided to stay. "So, how do we—" Scott began. "I think we wish," Ivy said. She rested her palms on the warm stone, closed her eyes, and listened for what water refuses. Water won't climb, it follows the true slope. She took a slow breath and chose her wish. "I wish," she whispered, "to be brave enough to keep going when I don't know the middle." Raina went next. "I wish to know when to tie tight and when to let loose," she said, thinking of knots and feelings and friends. Scott took longer. He looked at the map, at his shoes, at the distant, glimmering sky in the well. "I wish," he finally said, "to remember that doing a little is still doing." They waited. Nothing exploded. No music soared. No squirrel brought them crowns, though a squirrel did peer from the roof with the skeptical air of a squirrel who has seen a great many things and will see a great many more. "Maybe the well is broken," Scott said, a little disappointed and a little relieved. Raina wiped a circle of dust from the rim. Letters glinted underneath. Old, faint, but there. "Find the other well." "What?" Ivy laughed, surprised. "There's another?" "Or," Raina murmured, "the other well is not made of stone." They looked at one another the way you look at someone right as a thought knocks politely and asks to be let in. "Echo Hollow," Ivy said. "The pool," Scott said. "The bridgekeeper said the well knows everyone who asks for what's true," Raina added. "Maybe the stone well is the question. The other well is the answer." They ran, not because they were in a hurry, but because their legs wanted to be part of how the idea moved. Chapter 6. The Other Well. Back at the pool in Echo Hollow, the water wore the trees like jewelry. Dragonflies stitched light to shadow. The stones leaned in again. Ivy knelt on the bank. "How do we—" "Listen," Raina said, and they did. Water told them everything it would not do. It would not leap to the leaves. It would not forget the slope. It would not pretend to be sky when it was water. It carried what it carried, placed it where it needed to go, and still had room for reflection. Scott found a stick and drew the word wish on the soft bank. Water lapped the tail of the H. He erased it and wrote will, and the water said yes in 100 small silver ways. "I think," Ivy said slowly, "we don't toss coins here. We toss promises." They looked at one another again. Friends are mirrors when you need them to be. "I promise," Ivy told the pool, "to try even when I'm not sure of the next part." "I promise," said Raina, "to listen first and tie second." Scott took a breath. "I promise to start. Tiny, messy, but start." The pool brightened, not with light exactly, but with the feeling that a thing had found its shape. A frog surfaced nearby, like a sentence popping up to say also, then slipped back under. "Leave light," Scott remembered, and emptied his pockets. 2 paper clips, a smooth blue marble, a scrap of gold candy wrapper folded into a star. He set them on a flat stone. "Not for litter," he said quickly. "For later travelers, in case they need proof someone else was brave here." Raina added a length of bright thread. Ivy untied the pencil from her shirt, sharpened it with her pocket knife, and wrote on the back of the map. "The other well equals water plus promise." The wind threaded itself through the beaches and came out at the far end as applause. Chapter 7. The Way Home, which was also another trail. They didn't need the map to find their way back, not because they were experts now, but because they weren't afraid to ask. The lark pointed them along the best upwind. The hare thumped once. "This way." The fox did not appear, but a leaf collar lay at the foot of the bridge, and Raina tied it to her wrist without a word. Ribbon Ridge had changed while they were gone, though it was hard to say how. Maybe the shadows leaned differently. Maybe they did. Ivy's notes came faster. Scott's steps were surer. Raina's rope felt lighter, even though it weighed the same. When they reached the yard behind Ivy's grandmother's house, the day had only afternooned a little, like a song pausing between chorus and verse. They climbed the porch steps. Scott's stomach growled, which meant the adventure had been official. Raina grinned and broke the pair into 3, because pairs are better when they're divided, and because she'd been waiting all day to suggest it. Ivy spread the map on the porch floorboards. She traced their path with her finger. "We'll have to tell Grandma we borrowed this," she said. Raina's eyes danced. "Borrowed? We're not done with it." Scott swallowed. "There are more trails." "Trails we can't see yet," Ivy said. "Trails we make," Raina added. They sat quietly for a bit, because quiet is how adventures sit beside you and become part of your shape. A breeze tugged the edge of the map and turned it over. On the back, beneath Ivy's fresh equation, something else had appeared in faint, tidy letters none of them remembered writing. A well is anywhere you keep a promise. They looked at each other, at the yard, at the sky that wore its blue like a favorite shirt. There were so many places to keep promises. The world was full of wells. Chapter 8. A week of trails close up. On Monday, Ivy kept her promise when she raised her hand in class. Even though her answer felt like a kite in a complicated wind, it bobbed, it tugged, it didn't fly straight. Her teacher smiled like a harbor. "Yes," she said, "keep going." On Tuesday, Scott started a project he'd been stacking in his head like pancakes, building a small bridge over the puddle that formed at the end of their driveway every time it rained. The first version flopped. The second version tipped. The third version had just enough planks and just enough stubborn, and the neighbor's cat walked across it with the careful dignity of a queen. "A little is still doing," Scott told his glue-spotted hands. On Wednesday, Raina listened when her little brother shouted instead of using words. Inside the shout, she heard scared. She sat on the kitchen floor with him and tied a pretend rope between them so he could practice tugging when he needed help. He fell asleep against her arm in 5 minutes. She stayed so he would wake to the shape of being kept. On Thursday, they returned to Wonderwood, bringing 3 muffins, 1 blueberry, 2 cinnamon, to leave on the log where the hare had sat. The muffins were gone by the time they reached Echo Hollow. This felt like a proof of something steady and funny. On Friday, the lark's song threaded through Raina's open window, and she hummed along while she practiced the knots Ivy called comfort loops, loose enough to breathe, snug enough to stay. On Saturday, they taught 2 younger kids from the block the rule of the bridge: wander, wonder, listen. The younger kids made up a 4th rule, laugh, which Ivy wrote on the map because maps should evolve. On Sunday, rain came slow and thoughtful. The 3 friends sat on the briar porch again, watching the street become a long, reflective thought. Ivy wrote letters to the animals. "Thank you for your ideas." Scott built a tiny boat from the pear stick and candy wrapper star. He set it sailing down the Curb River with a cargo of wildflower seeds. Raina braided her rope with the leaf collar and a thread of blue. "Think anyone's at the wishing well today?" Scott asked, chin in hands. "Always," Raina said. "Us," Ivy added, "right now." They fell quiet once more, which is a good ending and also a good beginning. The end. Please like and subscribe.